people who might be interested. And then at the end, there will be time for question and answer and all of that. And so when that's going on, we will stop the recording so that people will have some, sort of privacy if you have personal questions or things like that that you wanted to ask or be addressed. This workshop, as Jill mentioned, is part of a series that's connected to the Mental Health is Essential campaign in Evanston, which is really about sort of getting the word out that it's important to take care of our mental health and that there are resources to help us take care of our mental health. So I realize already I see the date is wrong. So forgive me for that. It's February 9th. So to give you an overview, I'm going to be starting by sharing some common experiences of stress that many people have experienced during the pandemic, some unhelpful and helpful responses to stress, why self-care is important, especially during a pandemic. And then I'm going to be walking you all through putting together your own self-care plan. So some common experiences of stress, and these are certainly very general, but feeling overwhelmed, right? There is a lot going on. There is a lot to manage for those people who have school-aged children. It is probably trying to manage your child's education in a way that you probably never had to before unless you were already homeschooling. So making sure your child is engaged, wanting to make sure they're learning, navigating, trying to get your kid to stay on the screen even though they don't want to, right? Meanwhile, if you are working from home, sort of doing that in between meetings, in between working, or if you are going out and working, sort of navigating the challenges and the risks of, potential exposure to COVID, the exhaustion from that, figuring out who is going to watch your child. So there's just a lot to navigate right now. It's a lot. It can be really overwhelming. I think the other piece is there's a lot of uncertainty. As the vaccine gets rolled out, I think there's a little bit more hope that, we'll get out of this soon. And there can be a lot of worries about the future, right? Anxieties about, do I send my kid back to in-person school once that's available? What's going to happen with my job? Is my family going to be safe or okay? Is it okay for us to go out to eat or go to do this or that activity because we're tired of being stuck in the house, but we're not sure what the risks are, right? There's so much to sort of feel anxious about and worried about right now. And then I think a lot of people are also experiencing sort of a general sense of exhaustion, right? It's just fatiguing. We are about 11 months into the shutdown of the pandemic in Illinois, at least, right? So things shut down around March 17th, March last year. And so that's almost a year. And this has been a lot, I think, for most of us. People have had, sleep schedules thrown off, more stress, a lot of worry, not able to connect with other people in the way we want to, not being able to travel, just the exhaustion of feeling like every time you go out of the house, there's some risk that you're navigating, all of the hours on Zoom, all of that can just be a lot and really exhausting. And so, I want to just start by saying that this is normal, right? It's normal to experience stress in the midst of a very stressful situation. And the extended nature of this pandemic and this stress is a lot to navigate. And so if you're experiencing more anxiety, if you're experiencing more stress, if you're feeling depressed in a way that you're not used to, or if you have experienced those things before, but it's exacerbated right now, know that you're not alone in that and that it's not your fault, right? There's just a lot going on. And, as humans, we have a hard time when we're at a heightened level of stress for an extended period of time, right? That starts to sort of cause challenges physically, right? When we have elevated cortisol for extended periods of time, our bodies are sort of like, what's going on, right? I'm designed to if there's a tiger or a lion, you get the cortisol hit, you run away, you get safe, and then you calm down and you're good. But this situation where the tiger is always there and you're never getting away, right? That just wears on you day after day after day. So I just wanted to sort of normalize that. And I'm also curious to hear from you all. So I'd love if you would type in the chat. What are you specifically finding most stressful during this time, right? So it could be maybe something that I just pointed out. It could be something very different that I haven't mentioned, but would just be really curious to see what is it for you all? What are the things for you that are causing stress, um, that you're finding most difficult and challenging during this time? So I'll give you a few moments to just type in the chat. You could type one word, couple words. Um, Balancing home and work. Yes, that's a big one, especially if you're working from home. You know, a lot of people who are working from home are feeling like there are no boundaries, right? There's not that transition of driving to work and then driving home and turning off work. And it can sort of feel like work spreads everywhere. Let's see, taking care of everyone else. And by the time you get around to yourself, there's nothing left. Yes,
Mhm.
that makes a whole lot of sense. Lack of exercise, fear of going to the gym, exhaustion and isolation, exhaustion from isolation and work, balancing home and work. No one else is wearing masks, no consistency. So that can be really sort of frustrating and scary if you feel like I'm restricting myself, right, to keep myself and everybody else safe. Other people aren't following that. I don't feel safe. Supporting children's social and emotional health, right? So this is a lot, right? It's a lot to feel like you're responsible to take care of everyone else. It's hard to take care of yourself. You don't feel like you have access to the things that used to help you take care of yourself. The emotional exhaustion, needing to support children. Um, what is normal, maybe not even remembering what that feels like, or where we are going back to. Yeah, all of these things are so real. And so I appreciate you all sharing where you're at, sharing what you're carrying right now. And I hope that this workshop and seeing also what other people are sharing in the chat helps you to feel less alone. And I know that feeling less alone in it doesn't take it away, right? It's still stressful. And I do think that it's really easy to get caught up in criticizing ourselves or wondering what's wrong with us, or maybe everybody else is handling it better. And when we know we're not alone, when we know that other people are struggling in similar ways, it can be easier for us to respond to ourselves with kindness and compassion and understanding. So let's talk a little bit about some unhelpful responses to stress. So, I'm sharing these not for you to judge yourself, right? So the idea is not for you to look and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing this, this, and this, and that's unhelpful, and now let me beat myself up about it." That's not helpful. I'm sharing this list because these things are common, right? And often these unhelpful responses to stress are sort of initial attempts to cope that may help us feel better in the short term, but in the long term can sort of result in more stress or end up making us feel worse. And a lot of the things you'll see on this list are our attempts to control the situation. So when we feel out of control, we can try to get some control in some way, but sometimes the way we do that isn't so helpful or healthy. So again, as I talk through these things, I don't want you thinking, "Oh God, what's wrong with me? I can't believe I've done this," right? I want you thinking, "Oh wow, oof, I might have done that one. And yeah, I've noticed it's not so helpful." And the next thing we're going to do is talk about some helpful responses you could do instead. And then we'll be going into the self-care piece. So think about these things with compassion, and also think about your own that I may not have listed here. So one is overworking, right? the sort of sometimes it may be the demands of your job, especially if you're working from home, and potentially even if you're, going in and working at a grocery store, working at a hospital or a medical system, right? There may be sort of this demand for you to work constantly. And in some ways that could feel in the short term like it's helpful. Like, I'll just work, I won't think about anything else. I'll just put my head into the work, right? And we can sort of lose boundaries. If you're working from home, there's sort of always in answering emails from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And this can just end up exhausting you more, right? There's no breaks, there's no rest, there's no space for yourself. Pushing yourself too far physically look like over yourself to a limit that your body is sort of saying, hey, I'm tired, hey, I need rest, hey, I have an injury, and you're pushing yourself too far, you're doing too much. That could also be staying up too late, not sleeping, not resting, overscheduling your time. So having all of the Zoom meetings, all of the friend gatherings, sort of no space for yourself just to relax and rest. Um, Worrying about the worst possible outcome, right? I think often we can catastrophize, is what we sort of call it in the mental health field, which is when we sort of predict the worst possible thing. And the challenge with doing that is that our brains really cannot tell the difference between a prediction and the reality. And so if you spend a lot of time thinking, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to get COVID, and I'm going to be in the hospital for weeks and weeks, and I'm going to, right? If you do that, your body is going to respond as though that is happening now. And you will start to feel the stress as though you have lost your job, as though you have COVID, as though you are in the hospital now. And really, we think, oh, if I think about the worst outcome, then I'll be prepared. And I think there's a difference between saying, let me make sure I have my medical records in order. Let me make sure my family knows where they are. Let me make sure whatever, right? People have contact information, whatever. I have my health insurance. There's a difference between that and imagining yourself in the hospital with COVID for weeks, right? And we don't want to do the imagining yourself in the hospital with COVID, because what it does is it doesn't prevent you from getting COVID, right? Wearing a mask and being safe prevents that. It doesn't prevent you from getting COVID, but what it does do is it causes you a lot of stress now. So that is the sort of the challenge, right? Is to not let yourself fall into worrying about the absolute worst case scenario. So expecting everything to be perfect, right? I think this can particularly be true related to helping your children engage in school, right? They need to do every assignment on time. They need to be in every class perfectly. Like, some of those expectations are just not reasonable. I need to cook dinner every night for my family. We need to be together for dinner like any of those perfectionistic, my project has to be perfect, my presentation has to be perfect. Those things are not helpful, right? Again, it's an attempt to control the situation and control what we can about a situation, but it puts too much pressure on us, and it's unsustainable and ultimately not so healthy or helpful. Other common, responses to this stress are overeating, over drinking, overconsumption of drugs or other substances. I mean, people there, everybody jokes about their COVID weight, right? Like, and some of that is, we're stressed. There's not that much stimulation. Eating is a way to stimulate ourselves and experience some pleasure. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if you're finding that every time you're stressed, you're overeating to the point where you feel sick, or you just aren't feeling good because you are eating foods that you know your body doesn't respond very well to, then we want to sort of think about that, right? Or over drinking, right? I know, um, Maureen, who's the executive director of Peer Services, talked a lot about, the rise in substance use and alcohol use since the pandemic, right? That a lot of people have turned to alcohol to try to help soothe their stress and their anxiety. And, you know, I'm not saying that alcohol is a bad thing. And we know that even though it may feel good in the moment, ultimately it can cause more stress, more anxiety, more depression. And so overusing it can really ultimately be unhelpful. Um, there was this thing in the beginning of the pandemic where people were like, if you're not hustling during this time, I don't know what you're doing, like this sort of unhelpful thing. And then there was a great response, which was, we're in a pandemic, so just staying alive is good enough, right? And so, over ambitious, like, I'm going to get all this stuff, I'm going to clean everything, I'm going to lose this amount of weight, I'm going to get these goals, right? Like those things can cause extra stress. And we are already experiencing enough stress. So putting more pressure on ourselves to do all of that is not helpful. All right. So let's talk about some helpful responses to stress. Practicing acceptance and non-judgment. So I sort of alluded to this, but being kind to ourselves, acknowledging, you know what? It's a hard day. It's a hard week. This is a lot that I'm managing. I'm not going to get everything done. That's okay. My kid's not going to get all their homework done. That's okay, right? So, and the more accepting and non-judgmental you can be with yourself, the better, right? It will help to calm yourself down and help you feel less stressed if you can be accepting and non-judgmental. Take breaks, right? Take intentional breaks, whether that's a 10-minute walk outside. I know it's super cold right now, or, moving around, putting on some music and dancing in your living room, or, reading, or just closing your eyes, meditating, but taking breaks, giving your mind and your body a rest from the screen, from all of the activity, especially if you're working outside the home and you're feeling sort of stressed by that process. Whenever you can take breaks, it's going to be helpful. Lowering your expectations for your productivity, right? Knowing that you may get less done, right? You may just not be able to get as much done as you usually would. If you are a parent and you're working from home and you're also managing your child's education, you're not going to be able to get as much done as you would before. And keeping your expectations the same way they were before is only going to create stress, because you're going to be frustrated that you're not getting as much done when it's unreasonable, right? It's unreasonable to think that you can be as productive now as you were when you were in an office and you didn't have your children asking you for something every 15 minutes. Resting is a big one, right? Whenever we are under extra stress, our body needs more time to rest, right? And that could look like sleep. Generally, adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. I know a lot of people think, I only need 6, I only need 5, I'm fine. Generally, you probably need 7 to 9. And that coffee or Coke or whatever, it isn't a substitute for sleep. So just be aware that giving yourself space and time to rest, to relax, to rest your mind, and to sleep is crucial. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with the self-care plan. Engaging in activities that are soothing and relaxing, right? So stretching, a self massage, a bath, dancing, yoga, just laying down, right? Doing things that calm and ease your body and communicate to your body that you're safe, right? A big piece of what we need to do when we're stressed is that we need to communicate to our bodies and minds that we are safe, that we're actually not being actively chased by a tiger. And so we can rest, we can be calm, we can digest, right? Rest and digest is sort of the opposite state of fight, flight, freeze. So we want to get our bodies back into a place where we're resting and we're at ease. And so actively doing physical activities to engage in that can be really helpful. And the last thing I would say is setting boundaries, right? So I talked about how boundaries have been blurred, but setting a time when you no longer respond to work emails, right? Where you are, a time in the morning when, before that time you don't respond to work emails at or check them. After a certain time you don't respond to or check work emails, right? Setting some boundaries for yourself so that you can have rest and you can have breaks. I'd love to see in the chat, are there other things that you all have found to be helpful responses to the stress that you've been navigating? Naps. That's a good one. It's a good one. Talking, sharing with coworkers. Yes, certainly. So anything that helps us to feel not alone. Reading for pleasure. That's great. Love that. Yeah. So I encourage you to think, this is a list, 20-minute walks every day. 3. That's amazing. 3 a day. That's amazing. Ice cream Fridays with the kids, journaling and yoga. These are great. I love these. Um, so yeah, thinking about what are the simple ways that you can take a break, that you can reconnect to yourself, that you can have fun. Those are really great ways to respond and take care of yourself. So I've sort of alluded to some of these things, but thought I'd sort of explicitly say why self-care is so important, especially during a pandemic. So I mentioned sort of we need to do more to calm and soothe ourselves during this time. And pushing ourselves mentally and physically too far will only exacerbate our stress. We'll need more rest and relaxation than normal. It's, I think, even more important to be thoughtful about making sure to eat foods that are nourishing our body and don't stress our body. So, like for me, an example is I am lactose intolerant. So, as much as I know ice cream tastes good in my mouth, if I were to just be like, I'm going to eat all the ice cream, and it's not vegan ice cream, which I can't eat, but all the ice cream, it's like, that's just going to stress my body more, right? And it's just going to make me sick. So that's something that I'm not going to do right now, right? So if I want a sweet treat, I'll have a different sweet treat. But just being thoughtful about, we're already under enough stress, so wanting to nourish our bodies and not stress them out further by eating foods that we know maybe will make us sick. And then in general, self-care is good for our immune systems, right? And we're in a pandemic because there's a deadly virus. And so we want to do things that support our immune systems. And so when we sleep enough, when we exercise, when we rest, when we connect to other people in meaningful ways and have fun, all of those things are good for our immune system. So more reasons to do them, both for our mental health and for our physical health. So let's talk about some of the core components of self-care. So, there's obviously a lot of things that we can do for self-care, and self-care is sort of a term that's thrown around a lot. And, often I think self-care has often been sort of lost in this mix of, $100+ yoga pants and the hot yoga class that you take a picture of and whatever things that you can take pictures of and things that are expensive. And the reality is that the core of self-care is most things you should be able to do without spending money. Certainly, there are other things that you could spend money on, but my hope is that these things that I'm going to go over are very accessible and they don't involve a lot of money. So, the core components of self-care involve getting enough sleep. As I mentioned, adults generally need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Children generally need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Little ones probably need more than 10. And so, our brains do some important things when we sleep, right? They clear out the gunk that's gotten built up in there. They solidify memories. Our, muscles regenerate. There is so much that happens when we rest and when we sleep that is so important. And it's really essential to prioritize it. I think we'll talk in a moment about sort of maybe some strategies to help with that, because I know a lot of people struggle with getting enough sleep. Eating well, talked about that. Physical activity. And so, I think so often exercise is tied in our culture to wanting to change our bodies. And I think it's really helpful to disconnect those things, right? To make physical activity not about, oh, I got to lose weight or I got to gain muscle or I want to look this way or that way, but to make it about this is just what is involved in taking care of our health, right? And you choose how you want to move, basically. So, like for me, I love dancing. So that's what I do. Actually, I'm missing my dance class right now to be with you all, right? But I like taking dance classes or putting on music and dancing in my living room. I, do a streaming service where I do exercise classes. There's lots of classes on YouTube, right? I think there can be a sense of like, oh, everybody's doing CrossFit, everybody's running marathons. I have to exercise in that way. I do not like running. I don't like it. I have never liked it. So guess what I do not do for exercise? I don't run. Because why? Right? Like, so, and again, that for me, running is stresses my body. So it's not something that feels good for me. For other people, they love to run. They get a runner's high. It's amazing. So what I'm saying here is think about what you love to do to move your body and figure out a way to do that consistently. You don't need it to be heavy weights if you don't like weights, but if you love weights, great. Doesn't have to be yoga if you don't like that, but choose something that feels good for you and your body, and then make a plan to do it consistently. Time for yourself is another piece, time with friends and family, and time for fun. And those can obviously be combined. So let's move, because I think I go a little deeper here. So I will say that there's a self-care plan that you could download. And it's a sort of personalized worksheet, a worksheet that you can personalize it. If you look in the chat and you go to the very top, it's the second link that was pasted in the chat. And if you click on that second link, then you'll be able to download the PDF. And most people have an Adobe version, and you can sort of write in it using Adobe, or if you could print it afterwards, and you can write up your own self-care plan. So the first question to ask yourself is, how much sleep do you need to function well? I encourage you to indicate at least 7 hours. And then, we want to think about, okay, if you need 8 hours, for me, it's 8. What time do you need to get to bed in order to be able to get up when you need to get up, right? Like, what should your bedtime be, right? We sort of need to work backwards. If you have to get up by 7 a.m. and you need 8 hours of sleep, you need to be in bed by 11. And then you want to think about, what are some things, if you have trouble falling asleep, what are some things that you could do to help wind yourself down, right? It usually doesn't work to go from working on your computer and answering emails on your phone to falling asleep, right? Just like with babies and kids, we have, okay, now we're going to do bath time, then we're going to read a book, and then we're going to go to sleep, right? There's a transition that communicates to the child, we're getting ready for bed. We are winding. And the reality is that we're adults, but we still need that. So think about, what is your transition? Will you read? Will you shower? Will you listen to music? Will you talk to a partner, a loved one? Like, what do you want to do to transition yourself so that you're ready for sleep? And then if you still have trouble sleeping, I encourage you to use an app like Insight Timer or the Calm app or Headspace. They are all have many, many free meditations, and you can listen to that, and that should also help you fall asleep so you're not tossing and turning. What I do not recommend is computer in the bed, is phone and scrolling and checking emails. That is not conducive to helping you fall asleep. So that's with sleep. Feel free to type in the chat if you have questions as I'm going through this. Let's see. Just want to make sure. Okay. And then how would you like to eat to nourish your body, right? So with this, I'd love for you to think about what are 3 foods that you know when you eat them, you feel nourished, right? And it could also include like, I know if I drink enough water, I feel good, right? So what are some foods, drinks that you feel like, oh, when I eat this, I feel more energy, I feel more sustained, I feel good. So maybe write those down and think, okay, so what do I need to do to make sure that I eat them? If it's a snack, okay, I got to put it on the grocery list, or, I got to make sure to incorporate this. So think about what you'd like to eat to nourish your body during this time and how you're going to make that happen. And then the next piece is, what would you like to do for physical activity? So I just sort of talked about what I do and what I like and don't like, but what is it for you? What is your preference? How do you prefer to move? And when would you like to do that? Would you like to exercise in the morning? Would you like to do it in the evening, in the middle of the day? How often? What's realistic, right? If you are not exercising at all now, saying that you're going to go to the gym 5 times a week is probably not so realistic as a start. So maybe it's 2 days. Maybe it's saying, okay, I'd love to get out of my house for a walk for 10 minutes, 2 days a week, right? And then the next thing is choose which days. Because if you say I'm going to do it Wednesday, one of these days, and then you wake up Wednesday, you say, oh, but it's cold, I'll do it Thursday. And you wake up Thursday, and you say, oh, but there's snow on the ground. And then, right? So choose the days and sort of make a commitment to yourself about how you're going to do it, whether it's a dance party or a walk or yoga, whatever it is. Just know that our bodies are meant to move, right? It doesn't have to be about some weight loss goal. I encourage you just to think about how you'd like to move. Okay. Next, how much alone time do you need? So I realize that this is a challenging question in a pandemic. There may be some of you who are desperate for alone time because you live with people, you live with children, and you don't have any room or space on your own. There may be others of you who are single and live alone and are like drowning in alone time. Like it's too much and you need some time with other people. So this is a tricky one, but I want you to think about if you are desperate for alone time in particular, are there little ways you could get it? Could you extend that shower on the weekend, right? And just say, I'm unavailable. I'm in the bathroom and I'm unavailable for 30 minutes, right? Can you go for a walk to get out of the house? Can you go for a drive, right? Can you work with your partner and you trade times where each of you watches the kid and the other leaves the house and goes for a drive, right? But think about, you may not be able to get as much as you need. And are there creative ways in which you can get what you need in terms of alone time? And then the other part, how much time would you like to spend connecting with friends or family? And if you live alone and you're single, this may feel like, it may feel harder. And I encourage you to think about what are the creative ways, right? I think a lot of people are doing big Zoom calls, and that can be a lot of fun and connecting. And if that works for you, that's great. Sometimes it's hard to connect really deeply with people when there's a lot of people on a Zoom call, because it's hard to have, a deeper conversation. So, do you want to have calls with people? Can you go on walks with people? Would you feel comfortable with someone you're very close with, visiting their house, coming to your house with masks or in a safe way, right? But think about connection. We need connection for our mental and emotional health. And so I encourage you to be thoughtful about what you need there and what that could look like, and to be creative around that. Okay. So just some final considerations, and then we'll go into the Q&A. I'll stop sharing the screen. But watch your time on social media and limit it. We can sort of lose hours and hours that way. And so I just encourage you to be mindful of that. Manage and be mindful of your news consumption, especially, if you sort of tend to wake up and look at the news, or wake up and look at your email, wake up and look at social media. Those often are not great ways to start your day. And I encourage you to think about, how would you like to start your day? Is it with a meditation? Would you like to read or listen to something spiritual or religious or philosophical or uplifting, right? We can set the tone for our days if we decide what we consume and don't consume. But when social media, when the media, when our email is the first thing that we consume, we start our day with reacting. Oh gosh, this person emailed me. Oh my gosh, did you hear about this? Oh my gosh. And then we sort of roll into the day just reacting, reacting, reacting. And the morning is often a time when we can carve out a little bit of space and a little bit of peace. And so I encourage you to see if you can do that. And a last reminder to be kind to yourself in this process, especially if you're starting some new self-care routines. I don't expect, or I wouldn't encourage you to start everything at once, because again, that will be overwhelming. So I encourage you, if there's some new things you'd like to start incorporating, choose two of the things you identified and start this week, or maybe just one if two seems too many. Schedule the times when you're going to do it, right? So don't start, okay, I'm going to eat kale every day, and I'm going to go to bed 2 hours earlier every day, and I'm going to exercise every day. Like, that's too much. So maybe you say, okay, I'm going to exercise twice this week, and I'm going to do it on Thursday and Saturday, and I'm going to move my bedtime up by 30 minutes this week. So, start small, because when you start small, it feels more manageable. You're more likely to accomplish the goal, and that's going to motivate you to keep going and make progress. Versus if you start too big, it becomes overwhelming. You're less likely to accomplish the goal, and you're more likely to feel sort of defeated and less likely to keep going moving forward. Tell someone, right? Whether it's a friend or a partner or a parent, tell someone about what you're planning to do and ask for their support, ask for their encouragement. They can text you around your bedtime and say, hey, are you getting ready for bed? Or like, hey, did you have that smoothie this week? Or hey, let's go for a walk, right? There are ways you can get support with this. And then you can reward yourself, right? Celebrate your progress, celebrate your accomplishments in this process. Okay, so I have shared a whole lot. I have like 2 more slides I want to share. Actually, one more, and then I'm going to stop share, and we can go into question and answer and discussion. So I just wanted to share this. This flyer shows a number of organizations who provide free and low-cost mental health services in Evanston. And I wanted to share this because self-care can take us really far. And if you're struggling with anxiety or depression or a trauma response, therapy can really be what is most helpful. And so therapy, group support, group counseling, psychiatry can really be very helpful. So I wanted to encourage you to think about, if you're feeling like you're really struggling, really having a hard time, think about reaching out to one of these organizations. And I know that this information is shared. I think it is potentially on a library website. You might have to correct me if I'm wrong, Jill. But you can also take a picture. You could just, hold your phone up and take a picture of this. Um, but it, has resources. So if you're looking for some more mental health support, or if you know of someone who would like more support, please reach out, because there are many organizations, a lot of them represented here today on this workshop, that really want to offer that support. Okay. So with that, I will stop my share, and I'd love to hear your questions, your thoughts, your comments.